Thank you, everyone. It's so great to be here. And I have to admit, I'm new to the Sooner State, so I have to get my trash talking up and running. Maybe we can work on that later. Great. So earlier this year, I published a monograph with Stanford University Press, and the project is called Enchanting the Desert. And the publication, it's important to note, is unique in that it does not actually exist as a printed book. At least a version of it doesn't exist as a printed book yet. But rather, it only exists as an interactive website. So as historical, and in my case, geographical scholarship relies more and more on digital tools, this has been somewhat of a notable thing to do, a notable publication, since university presses have somewhat ironically been slow to catch up with how historians are using the digital realm to do things. So I'm really excited to show you this, this project today, as it's centered on a single historical document that I know will be of great interest to you all, which is a 43-image slideshow of the Grand Canyon made for mass popular consumption. And the slideshow was made between 1899 and 1930 by a commercial photographer named Henry Peabody. So we actually just saw one of Henry Peabody's pictures in the last presentation. It was the one of John Hance with a gun and the squirrel, the 3 rabbits or whatever. That's a Peabody. He's made a number of trips through the 3 first decades of the 20th century to the Grand Canyon. Here you're looking at some of his pictures from the slideshow, not all of them. So historically, why is this slideshow important? Well, I think most immediately it fills a gap in the history of Grand Canyon photography. In 1899, the year of his first trip to the Grand Canyon, Peabody was at the leading edge, as we've heard already this morning, kind of at the leading edge of the age of mass tourism, as European American settlement at the canyon was transitioning from prospecting to tourism. So when Peabody first arrived, there was no railroad, and we were still a couple of years away from the Cole brothers setting up their now famous studio. So the slideshow, therefore, it's one of the earliest surviving mass-marketed slideshows of the Grand Canyon, meaning that it serves as a sort of visual template for what people actually saw when they saw the Grand Canyon. Think of all the virtual tourists and the virtual consumers in Ohio and the East Coast and things like that. Furthermore, Peabody, along with his colleagues, one of which was William Henry Jackson, kind of taught us what photographs of the Grand Canyon could look like. And in many ways, this template is still with us today. And in fact, decades later, the grooves, both metaphorically, but also the actual paths that Peabody helped deepen, would help the Park Service decide where to build lookouts, walking paths, guardrails, and he helped establish and concretize this way of seeing the Grand Canyon. So what actually is this visual template is one of the questions that was really interesting to me. This visual template that Peabody helps create. Well, from viewing the slideshow alone, it's a little bit hard to tell. So my aim with this project, Enchanting the Desert, has been to create a geography of Peabody's camera vision that until now really hasn't existed. Well, what does it mean? This is just one of Peabody's pictures, just to give you a sense. This is one of his first trip from 1899. And these are 8x10 glass dry plates, and they're gorgeous, you can tell. So what does it mean to create a geography for a series of images? Well, 2 things really. For me, it grounds the photographs in what I think of as absolute or map space, as well as it builds a cultural geography of the region that exists as a spatial narrative. And you'll see what I mean by these 2 kinds of geography, like a mapping of where he was, and then the storytelling of kind of what you're looking at. There's a problem that emerges, though, when we reconstruct and view these photographs serially, when you kind of remake the slideshow. That is, something is lost in the genre of the slideshow itself. The geography of what's going on is kind of lost in the transition between these instantaneous click slides where one image changes to the next instantaneously. So the historian of art and technology, there's this person named David Nye, kind of put his finger on this problem. He studied visual history of the Grand Canyon. He says roughly 2,000 square miles in extent, the canyon contained no central feature. All photographers face the problem of representing the whole on the basis of a selection. But what should they actually select? What, if anything, made the canyon meaningful? And if one saw it, what had one seen? So keep in mind that this historian, David Nye, is writing this in comparison with places like Yosemite, where Half Dome is the defining iconic landmark, or Yellowstone with Old Faithful. The solution to Nye's problem that Thomas Moran, we heard about Moran earlier today too, Moran was onto this problem, and what he did was kind of invent his own foreground, his own perspective, and exaggerated the canyon landmarks, trying to conjure places on which the eye could rest, so that people said, oh yeah, there's a feature, I get it now. This is that insight about Thomas Moran, some of you will know, was made by Stephen Pine, has written about that, along with some others. Well, Peabody's approach to this problem of how to represent the Grand Canyon was different. With 43 photographs, Peabody, he was actually kind of trying to select everything at once, so to speak. He was trying to show the whole thing. But when viewed serially, the photos leave one spatially disoriented, not knowing where you're standing or even what direction you're looking, unless you're like all of you who really know the Grand Canyon. But most people don't know this when they look at Peabody's pictures. So up to this point, I'm going to boil down what I've trying to say into two deceptively simple questions. One, where was Peabody standing? And two, what are the places captured in the photos, and why are those places significant to the cultural history of the Grand Canyon? So here's another Peabody slide. This is the geographical analysis part of the project. But again, Enchanting the Desert does something else too for the history of the region. So that is, in this project, I'm trying to use Peabody's slideshow as a visual window into a landscape that was undergoing the most dramatic cultural transition in its history. Peabody's photographs let us see the Grand Canyon as the processes of European American colonization of the land were taking place. And you can kind of, this is, now you're looking at a screenshot of the console of this website project, and you can see the titles, or sorry, the titles of the chapters: toponymy, which is place naming; exploration; settlement; tourism; and infrastructure. So these, I think of these as kind of subtle mechanics of colonization, are the titles of what happens in this project. In the process of identifying where Peabody was standing and the cultural details of the places we see, I'm treating Peabody's landscape photos as a kind of map. And I'm trying to depict the specific places where these profound transformations from Native America to modern American culture were actually happening. And that's important. Where did these things happen on the ground, and how can we learn about them through looking at the pictures? Well, it's easy enough to say that the photos operate collectively as a map of the region, but the challenge really was how to technologically repurpose these images as interpretive tools. In other words, how could I operationalize Peabody's photographs into an interpretive cultural geography? So this project is really my attempt to answer this question. And there's there's a lot of stuff going on, but I want to show you a demo now, and this will help you kind of sink in some of the ideas. I like to do live demos usually when I do this, but we don't have internet in here. So these, which is fine, but you'll just notice that these are screenshots of the site as we go through. So when I say things like, if you click here, I mean that when you go home and log onto the internet and you click there. I'm just advancing slides. Okay, so what I really wanted to do is design a platform, and I should point out that my colleagues and I built this web platform. Really, we found that we needed to build it from the ground up. So there's this is a 5-year project. It took a long time to conceive and build this. But I wanted a platform on which I could build a reader experience really defined by the movement between 3 different representational types. And those 3 representational types are, to put it simply, Peabody's photos, essays about the things you're looking at, and this custom cartography. So right now you're looking at slide 24. It happens to be slide 24, with its associated map and essay alongside. Readers can move to the next slide in Peabody's slideshow by either clicking up here. You can advance to 25, and you see the next slide in his slideshow. 26, you see the next slide in his slideshow. Or you can maneuver around through the slideshow using this photo ribbon up at the top here. You can kind of bounce around however you like. So below each of the photos, you'll notice there's this toolbox. I like to call it a toolbox. And here, readers can turn on things like landmarks. So you can see them on and off there. You can turn on trail information, and even these kind of tints that replicate the hand color tinting that these lantern slide sellers, people like Peabody, would use. So let's turn on that landmark layer again, and you can see that some of these are colored red, some of those landmarks, indicating that there's an essay about a relevant piece of cultural history that's actually connected to that place. So say I click on Francois Mathis Point, and lo and behold, we're brought to this essay about Francois Mathis Point. I should note too that this morning during Harvey's talk, we saw one of Mathis's maps in action that he was using to show a route to somewhere, I forgot. But that was a Mathis map. Let's see, so, okay, so you're brought to this essay, and there's 80 of these essays total, so there's plenty of reading. Okay, so what happened here is now if I click on this map, what that does is, this is a nice functionality, is it kind of switches out what you're looking at, and you see the essay went down here, and now the map is in this big viewing window. And the lines that you see drawn here are lines drawn from the standing points where Peabody took photos in which Francois Mathis Point can be seen. So if you were watching Peabody's slideshow back in like 1905 or something, you wouldn't know this, but in photos 2, 23, 24, and I can't see that, 30, oh, thank you, there's 37, Francois Mathis Point would appear. So this is very spatial analytical, right? This is kind of part 1 of the geography of doing this. And so this kind of analysis, it's like we're watching Peabody watch the Grand Canyon from above. If I click on one of the images up here, you can see that photo 24, you probably remember from a few slides ago, is up there. And then this weird red crimson blob appears on the map. So this is called a viewshed, and it shows readers all the visible territory captured in Peabody's 24th slide. So you're mapping out Peabody's camera vision, basically, into a map. At the top, I showed you the photo ribbon at the top. If you roll over those, or if you click on those with your mouse in map mode, you can see each one of the photos has a viewshed associated with it. What this does, I think, is it gives us a cartographic portrait of what Peabody and what his virtual tourists would have seen in this iconic photographic representation of the Grand Canyon in the early 20th century. This is a big one. So map toolbox, a couple more just demo things. Thank you. And then I'll kind of wrap up. So the map toolbox is a little bit different. These red dots are what I call station points, which are very basically the places where Peabody was standing when he took all of his pictures. You have your narrated landmarks. So again, you can, if you were to click on one of those, you'd be brought to the essay that's about that place. Angles of view and view directions, it just kind of gives you a quick glimpse of where Peabody was looking. And this is what I think is probably the most, this was the hardest thing to build technically, was probably, however, the most rewarding thing. So this is, and the most telling thing for us as visual historians and geographers of the Grand Canyon. This is what I call a composite viewshed map. So if you remember that red blobs that you saw, those were paired, one red blob for one photograph. And if you turn on all those red blobs at once, all the viewsheds at once, you basically end up with all 43 pictures overlapping. And you can see the Grand Canyon that if you were, again, someone in, say, 1905, sitting through Peabody's slideshow in a YMCA in West Virginia, this is the Grand Canyon that you would see, right? The darker purple areas being the places most represented, and then the gray areas being the places of what I think of as zones of visual abandonment, where you wouldn't even know that they existed visually from looking at Peabody's slideshow. So one of the main points of all this, you've begun to see this digital medium does things that print media cannot. I love books. I want to make a book out of this. I write lots of other print stuff. But I think this really does something valuable. And I think it allows for a novel critical practice in how we think of spatial narratives. So the way narrative functions in Enchanting the Desert departs from the way narrative is most often conceived and portrayed in history and even digital history projects. I'm going to get technical for just jargony for 1 second, then I'm going to pull you back. The spatial narrative that I'm trying to practice in Enchanting the Desert is it's based on a spatial epistemology. So that is the things existing in spatial relation with one another are considered a priori related. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, access to the cultural history that unfolded at, again, say, Francois Mathis Point, is accessible right alongside the pieces of cultural history that happened at Angel's Gate. So topically, this stories that happened here and stories that happened there may not be related, but spatially they are. And so the digital platform really allows for this type of geographical or spatial narrative. Yeah, so the answer to, and I'm seconds away from finishing, the answer to what does the production of space look like might very well be something like this composite viewshed map. This is creating a new cultural space. Peabody was helping do that by circulating his slideshow. This is Peabody's Grand Canyon, the Grand Canyon used by his slideshow customers around the country to get their first and often only view of what was quickly becoming, quote unquote, their Western iconic landscape. So when you get to a place with fast internet, there you go, enchantingthedesert.com. Thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.